Well, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. We are about 5 minutes away to start the webinar, so bear with us. We'll try to start at 12 o'clock EST sharp. In the meantime, we're going to share some material about the Miami Hub, so you guys get to know who we are and what we're doing, and that way you can get to know us better. Okay, so give us 5 minutes and we'll start. Only 2 minutes away, guys. 2 minutes away. Welcome to all of those who have joined us in the last 3 minutes. We'll start at 12 sharp EST. In the meantime, enjoy the information about the MIA Hub. Any interest, any information you may want, you can contact Gabriela Rosier or myself directly. We'll be delighted to tell you more about the hub, what it does, how can it benefit you, your company, etc. So. All right, 12 o'clock sharp, guys. And with the magic number of 25 attendees, it's actually going up, 26 now. Welcome, everybody who's joined us to this fantastic webinar on cyber resilience and cybersecurity and cyber insurance. So all things cyber for those of us who enjoy cyber as a topic and as a key segment in our insurance industry. I'm joined today by Paula Oliveira. Paula, I can't pronounce your middle name, so I'm not going to even expose myself to it. So apologies for that. But thank you so much for being with us. This is great to have you here and for you to share your experience with us. So we are delighted. And we also have Alan Abreu from Box Insurance, also joining us from very different parts of the world. Paula and Katai are based in Brazil, but with a wealth of knowledge not only on the Brazilian market, but also Latin America. Alan is based in Madrid, Spain, again, with a wealth of knowledge in the European market, but also in the US, where he has been working recently with Box and the launch of the business there. So plenty to cover today. A great 1 hour session. If it's very interesting and everybody copes with us, then probably we'll go over that, but we'll try to keep it at around 45, 50 minutes so we can keep some time for questions. People who may have questions towards the end of the session when we open that up, you can do it through the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try to moderate as good as I can. And so with that, let's just kick off. Why don't we start with you, Paula? Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your experience, and then we'll do the same with Alan, and from there we'll start a conversation about cyber.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hilario. I'm really happy to be here today. And well, Oliveira is my international last name, so just feel free to call me Paula Oliveira. So let me introduce, it's a pleasure to be with all of you guys here. Cat Cyber is an insurtech Brazilian-based company, and we are developing a solution to quantify and monitor cyber risks to sell cyber insurance policies here in Brazil. Telling a little bit about my background, I'm a lawyer. I've been working in the insurance industry for over 10 years with focus on financial line products. And my last job before founding Cat I was head of tech projects of an insurance broker called Horians. It's a boutique broker. And now I am developing, we are disrupting the cyber insurance market here in Brazil with Cat It will be a pleasure to talk to you guys and to talk about cyber insurance, cyber resilience. I could really go over hours talking about that. So I hope you all enjoy our conversation.
Excellent. Great to have you with us. Alan, your turn.
Super. Thank you, Demi Hub. Thank you, Larry, for having me here. I'm a Venezuela living in Europe. I've been involved in the insurance industry for around 20 years, most of the time in insurance company as from the underwriting perspective, the last 16 years within financial lines, the last 9 or 10 years fully dedicated to cyber risk. And even like a short period in a very well-known broker, just fully dedicated to cyber as well. So I'm currently in Box Insurance, developing business in Europe, and part of the underwriting team for the US team.
Excellent. Well, I think the first thing that's interesting to explore here is that cyber being new, none of us really started on cyber. As it might not be the case if we were having a session on property or specialty risks or anything like that. You know, someone would have said I started in motor, or I actually started in specialty or construction engineering, but it's hard to find someone in any webinar that says, yeah, I've been in my insurance career the last 20 years and I actually started in cyber. That would have been such a pioneering thing. I haven't seen it, at least. So it's great that, you know, in general, none of us come from cyber, but we are now fully dedicated to cyber. You know, there's enough market out there in any geography, and cyber is such a big risk that, you know, you can properly say that there are full-time cyber jobs well beyond the context of the corporate environment where cyber risks have been for a number of years. So with that in mind, I guess, Paula, the key question to start with you is, why cyber? You know, you were working in the insurance industry, but doing something completely different. What is it that made you say, cyber looks interesting, and therefore I'm actually going to make the jump? Number one, from an insurance perspective, but then number two, what made the jump even to become an entrepreneur on cyber and cyber alone? So I think that would be interesting to hear.
Wow, very interesting questions. Well, whenever I talk about a little bit of why did I found Cat Eye Cyber, or why am I so keen on cyber, I always like to begin with a very holistic approach on what insurance actually is. So let's forget about insurance. Let's assume for a few minutes that we're not in the insurance industry. What insurance actually is. When we're looking for an insurance policy, we're actually looking for a transfer of risks, period. We're trying to transfer our risks. So we're simply purchasing a product or seeking a solution to, with the knowledge that we have some risks and we cannot, it wouldn't be responsible to assume all this risk by ourselves. So we seek transferring of risks. For me, that's number one. When that's the first thing I always say when I try to explain why I moved to cyber. So when you think about the transfer of risks and you look around, to me, it's very clear that cyber risks are the largest risks we have right now. And it is on the rise. It's not going anywhere. And it's difficult to understand. It's very difficult to understand because, just like you said, none of us come from cyber. And even if we did, it doesn't matter because it changes so much. It's a very dynamic risk. So, for example, when you asked, what led you to, how did you have this idea of founding Cat Eye Cyber? In my last job, when I was head of tech products in this broker, I had the opportunity to develop a crop paramedic insurance. Because crop insurance is very large here in Brazil, because we have we're very reliable on agriculture in our economics. But the thing is, it's very hard to understand and quantify catastrophic risks, right? And when you think about the nature, you think about catastrophic risks such as hurricanes or flood. It's hard to quantify them. But if you have a lot of data, it's easier to quantify them, right? And so while I was developing this product, we had over 20 years of data to develop this product. And the thing is, and I just kept thinking, oh my God, we have to do something similar with cyber. Nobody understands cyber. Even Warren Buffett said that cyber is really hard to understand. He said it on 2018, and I think that he has a different opinion right now. I'm pretty sure he does. But thing is, it's very different. I can't just collect 20 years of data and try to quantify cyber, because I'm not going to say it's worthless, but 20 years of data on cyber, it's not worth much, actually. It's a very dynamic risk. So I really love big challenges, and I really love hard problems. I like solving hard problems. And I started studying what was going on in the US, for example, which is much more mature market than here in Brazil. And I think that we have a way of figuring out cyber, of figuring out what to do, of quantifying cyber. And it's hard because we don't have enough data yet. And it's a very dynamic risk. So I think that when you talk about cyber resilience and the concept of transferring risks, it makes more sense to build a solution thinking about these two variables, because you have to quantify it in a different way. You can't treat it like property. It's not property. It's something different. It's very dynamic.
Yeah, and I like that thought process that you mentioned, because it keeps you on your toes, right? It's not as if go get me a bunch of data and then I'll just put it in a model and then I'll analyze it and all that. This is live data. It's happening all the time, right? So you need to be on top of it, and that makes it a lot more exciting. a lot more complex, but a lot more exciting, without a doubt. And the other thing is that I think, and probably Alan, you can help us with that based also on your experience. I think it's also forcing other lines of business to think about how to manage live data of certain risks that traditionally have not done so. And the first thing that comes to mind is when you have IoT devices, associated with, different risks. And the most simple of them all to think about is telematics for auto insurance, right? 20 years ago, no telematics, no IoT for car insurance. It was a static risk. Now it's a far more dynamic risk, and it's an interesting one to do. But with that, over to you, Alan, to tell us a little bit about similar perspective on what Paulo was mentioning, but clearly with your angle around the European market and now what you've been exposed in the US market.
Sure. Probably, I love probably the challenge that cyber represents. That's probably we are probably everyone. It's aligned in that perspective. What I think the cyber risk, like the challenge, of course, for me, data is limited. I mean, not only about the amount of data, but it's so dynamic from understanding the risk that for me there should be other elements to take into account to really to understand the exposure we face or what the client face beyond protection. So I'm more what I love, for instance, when during my time as a broker, that understanding having those conversations with clients that need help to understand the risk. Some of them need it. No, I have no idea. I just need to. This is a contractual requirement, but some others really were concerned about the exposure they were facing and had no idea about it. They know about their business, but not about the risk they face. So I think I've been during this almost 10 years. I think what I really like promote is like if we want to understand like what cyber risk we are facing, we need to understand the business model, what technology they use, where they develop their business. It's not saying that in Brazil probably they may use the same technology in here in Spain or in Brazil, but they might be different circumstances. You may call it regulation that might force you to act one way or the other. So imagine the availability, how much technology could cost. So no, there are other elements I need to be part of that analysis beyond protection. That's probably what we as probably insert tech companies, we need to try to be disruptive in that perspective.
That's an interesting point. Let me stick with you for a second. So you touched on regulation, and you're based in the European Union, and we all know that regulation in the European Union, in some aspects, not necessarily in all of them, it's quite advanced relative to other markets, right? Does that make it easier or more difficult to position cyber as a risk in the market? One angle, on one angle, you could argue that, okay, yeah, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, therefore more people need to actually have coverage for the risk. But at the same time, well beyond that regulatory requirements, what else is out there in the market that's driving that?
Sure. I mean, there are of course like different things, but when GDPR was enforced, that of course was the main argument for or the main concern from clients. To meet that, so they were what's the scope of this insurance? How I'm protected? If I'm fully protected if I buy this, but it's a cycle, so it depends. So there are even within industries there are really different elements, and they based on your profile. If you're a listed company, there's some from a central bank or a European bank. There's really some like due diligence they are pushing banks to conduct. vendors related to the whole financial industry are really pushed to meet the higher standards, to have those higher standards. So there are different circumstances. The regulation has moved, comes up and down depending on what industry you're developing um, your business. And there are new regulations that are coming that are trying to regulate. This is very new. I haven't been able to look at it properly, but it's looking to regulate data beyond personal data, all the data that all these IoT devices are producing and collecting. This is a new regulation that the I think is in force already. So all countries will have, generally speaking, 2 years. So that for sure that would impact in the market depending on what you do, depending of your business model, depending on how many IoT devices you collect. So that's why I come again to the point, depending on what technology you use. If you don't use like IoT services, or you don't use sensors to collect all data, you might need less exposed to that, potentially to that regulation. But if not, a manufacturing company that for years has been using sensors, they will probably be been exposed, and so many other industries.
And I think the exposure point is more around how much coverage they need, right? So in the end, if you're a more standard organization without IoT devices and connections to the cloud and all that, probably in the initial stages, you don't need that much coverage because your exposure is lower. But as soon as you adopt new technology, then that opens the box into a number of things that you require to have, and one of them being, a lot more coverage than you would traditionally would have purchased
Yeah,
before.
they might be scared just to being fined. So if maybe there's haven't been able to look at it, but if they're fined, so of course that would be the element. One of the when we launched GDPR, just as a broker, people were asking what limit should I buy. So we used the 2% or the 4% as a reference to just advise client what limit they should buy. This is just a simple element that as a reference. So we don't know. In Europe, the rough core regulation is an important driver, but it's, I would say, is not the main one. I mean, the real exposure, all crime, everything related to crime, or an outage. That's really a scary part.
Interesting, very interesting. So Paula, if we stick with the regulatory environment, but more from a maturity point of view, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position to talk about the regulator or anything like that, but how do you see the Brazil market from the maturity perspective that the regulation is actually advancing for cyber? Um, where do you see the pockets of opportunity? Therefore, either by lack or by implementation of certain regulation for cyber.
Yes. Well, as I was listening to Alan speaking about the GDPR, I was just thinking how far behind Brazil is. And we are very far behind because the LGPD, which is the Brazilian GDPR, just came into force in 2021 and will start applying fines from this year on. So I really believe it brought awareness to companies. I can see that companies are becoming more aware and more concerned about their cyber environment. I think that regulation bring this kind of awareness to companies. I think it's important because, well, if nothing is going to happen to you, if you just leave your cybersecurity unattended, then you're not going to do anything. But I really do believe that the main concern is, I mean, when I think about the clients that reach out to us trying to purchase an insurance policy, they're either clients that have been attacked and have suffered some financial losses due to this attack, or clients that are concerned with regulatory issues because they're either being invested or they're in an M&A process and their investor is usually a foreign company and they're concerned about compliance. So I think that compliance brings awareness, regulatory issues bring awareness. Brazil matured very much last year. We jumped from 2021 to 2022. We are now number 18 in a list of 194 countries. This is a list made by UN regarding cybersecurity. We were number 78, if I'm not incorrect. So we had a major a major advance when it comes to awareness in cybersecurity. I think it's because of regulation. I think everything happened at the same time. I mean, the pandemic, the regulation, and the fact that we are being or being so much attacked. We had very bad impressive numbers last year. We were number 3 in terms of data breach, only losing to China and Russia in the first quarter of 2022. And 77% of the Brazilian companies suffered some kind of cyber attack last year, and 28% of these companies, they suffered financial losses. So it's a very big number, and well, something has to be done. But I also think that regulation brought awareness, for sure. We are foreseeing some regulation for specific markets, such as energy, for example. So last year, there was a new regulation enforced for energy market, establishing some cybersecurity measures for this specific market. And I think it is a trend. I really do believe it is a trend. We are going to see regulation becoming tighter and fines being finally applied. I mean, I think it's really it's really amazing that fines haven't been applied so far, but they will. I know that companies are worried, and I think that they are becoming more aware, and they will finally do something about transferring of risks. I don't only mean I don't mean insurance only. I really mean transfer of risks in general and the cyber resilience thing.
And so it's great that you just mentioned that, because that's our theme today. Let's stick with that for a second. So and if you could tell me that from your Brazilian market perspective, but equally let's jump into LATAM, the rest of LATAM for a second as well, if you can. Mm-hmm. So clearly regulation, awareness, concern, preparation, etc. Do you think that companies are really looking at the cyber resilience perspective from a cyber security plus cyber insurance perspective, or are they mostly looking at it from a cyber security, meaning technology only? And if it's both, then how do you see that balance evolving then?
Well, I'm going to be brutally honest, but I think when you look at the numbers, okay, I'm just going to give you 2 numbers. Brazil invested almost $1 billion last year in cybersecurity. However, the cyber insurance market is only $35 million. It's very different. It's very different. And the thing is, why is that? My opinion is we are very much in our infancy regarding cyber insurance here in Brazil. We have a lot of restrictions towards some activities here in Brazil. So we have a lot of activities. Depending on our activity, it's very hard to purchase an insurance policy here in Brazil. But the thing is, when you look at those numbers, in my opinion, you have 2 answers. Yes, companies are looking at cyber resilience, but there's something obviously wrong with the product, with the insurance product. So is it product market fit? In my opinion, yes. I think we have a product market fit problem here, but I think that we also have a capacity problem. I think it's a global issue. I know all the insurance companies, all the insurtechs are struggling with this. I think it also brings a lot of opportunity for insurtechs. But I think that I'm very much a product person, so I always think about a product market fit. People have budget to spend on cybersecurity, and for me, it makes perfect sense to include cyber insurance in this journey. So I really believe in the fact that don't think about the word insurance, think about transferring risks, right? So if you're investing in cybersecurity, you can also invest in cyber insurance, and it has to fit your budget and your needs. I think that the main issue is really product market fit. And the second, I wouldn't say second or first, I don't know if it's the second or if it's the first. It really is capacity, because that's what you said when we started this webinar. Nobody knows what to do with cyber. I mean, I'm not going to say nobody knows. We are getting to know, we're getting to know it better, but it's still very cloudy for insurance and reinsurance companies. I think we have a really good way to go. But once again, great opportunity for insurtechs, because this is a market that can only be disrupted with a very wise usage of technology.
I love that. That's a great segue to you, Alan, because there's always been the criticism, at least from my part, that you can't, if I'm an insurer and I'm selling a cyber policy, from an image perspective, at least from a marketing perspective, if the policy that I deliver is on paper, and on paper only, you have to understand what's in it for you as a customer. To quote Paula is, okay, what kind of transfer of risk am I actually getting here? But beyond that, it's equally, this is a risk I don't know anything about. In fact, I've gone to my broker or I've gone to my insurance company and I've said, help me, advise me on what should I do. And the solution can be only the transfer of risk. That's fine. But a sophisticated player should offer both the transfer of risk, but equally the tools of the trade to prevent that transfer of risk to be triggered. Because of the nature of the risk, it's cyber, it's digital, it's omnipresent, it's global, it has no boundaries, etc. So what does that look like, Alan, from your experience? What is the mix and match of that to truly be a transfer risk that has, digital risk management because of the nature of the product?
How much time do we have? There's a lot
Well,
to cover on that.
it's a good
I'm kidding.
it's
I'm
good that
kidding.
you asked, though, because we're at the half-hour mark, so we should have another 15 minutes of conversation.
Okay, perfect. I mean, there's a lot to cover, but even like taking into account the different players in this risk transfer journey, which would be, at least as in summary, would be the client, the broker, and the insurance company. So, of course, from a product perspective, there's a lot to do. I agree with Paula. We need to make that a lot more easy to understand for clients and for brokers as well. To have a very simple thing, probably with less gray areas, how to address that more, I don't know, affirmatively to a client, so we could potentially raise their confidence about what they are buying. Oh, it says that I'm covered here. It says that I'm covered here. So probably that's a very simple step up. From the risk perspective, of course, that's probably what InsurTech World is really adding value, is the whole ongoing monitoring. That's as a way to really manage this risk. This is not like a one shot. This is not, probably when I started was very long questionnaires, 10 pages, and that's it. Things have changed a lot since then. So not only that we have going deep for certain risk by understanding that, but as a partnership that we offer for the broker and for the client, we will be there for you during the policy period, or during the time we are married. So, well, that's the ongoing monitoring. It's just part of the what we could offer to just add that value, just to help them to be insurable, which is something that I love as a concept, how we can move on and help a client to be insurable. probably all the circumstances of the market. Of course, we need that capacity. We need that probably a specialization from brokers to really understand the risk and help us to do that. But it has to be a partnership between the three of us. But of course, the insurtech, other insurance company, need to provide that everything the client might need to really feel that is less intangible or more tangible solution.
Well, let me give you a feel for the point you both are making. We know that at a certain point in time this year, in Brazil alone, in the financial services sector, let's put it that way, there were at least 700,000 data records being traded on the dark web. Just think of that for a second, right? And those included more than 25,000 stolen login credentials, right? So, this is stuff that it's happening as we're talking about here. It's happening everywhere you are. It doesn't matter if you're in Brazil, if you're in Spain, if you're in Santiago de Chile, if you're in Mexico City, it doesn't matter. There are hundreds of thousands of data records being traded on the dark web right now, and there's a number of login credentials that are being exposed right now. And the reality of the matter is that you don't see any or very few of your service providers out there saying, we've got your back, right? And so, it is very important what you both are saying in terms of regulations need to accompany the fact that that risk is out there and it's affecting people. That there's fines for people who are ignoring it in terms of providing that safety net for their customers. But equally, that there's someone thinking way ahead of what needs to be done beyond what needs to be complied with to deliver real solutions for the customers that are being exposed. Because again, another thing that you both have said in this call is this is the most dynamic risk we've faced. It affects the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor, the biggest of the corporations, and the smallest of the SMEs. And the reason is there are common denominators that everybody today has in any of those segments I've just mentioned. If you're an individual and you have a smartphone, you're out there. If you're a small and medium business and you are on AWS or on any cloud service, you're out there. And so, what you guys have set up to now is tremendously important. And for those of us who are listening to us and watching us today, it's equally important for your own business, whether you're a provider, whether, you're a service company, it doesn't matter. The context is how much do you know about cyber and how can you protect yourself better to be able to really deliver a solution for you and your clients, et cetera, et cetera. So, the interviewing and the interviewer, and I'm doing all the talking in the last 5 minutes. So let me go back to the interview and then say, so Latin America, Paula, we haven't spoken that much about Latin America. So in your experience then, where do you see the differences today between markets in Latin America? If you see any differences or if there's any interesting points or examples that you may want to point out about what's happening in the rest of Latin America, excluding Brazil for a second.
Yes, so far, very, very good point, Hilario. I was just thinking about the numbers, and I think these are the numbers we think we know. I think it's much bigger. I know that systemic risk is a problem. I'm going to address it later, but first I'm going to answer your question about Latin America. I think that very similar to Brazil, the regulatory issue for me, it is important, and for the industry to grow. And in Latin America, I think we're far behind when we look at Europe and the US. And for example, I was telling you about how much Brazil spent on cybersecurity. It was $1 billion last year. In Argentina, they spent 15 million. I'm sorry. Yes, they spent $50 million in cybersecurity. So we have a gap there. Of course, Brazil is so much bigger, but we also have an opportunity because Latin America is starting to, I think we are still very much in our infancy, but I think we are a prominent market. I think we have a lot to grow. And respectfully, insurance companies and reinsurance companies, they're not paying much attention in Latin America. And I think that is a mistake up until now, because we are evolving, we're growing, and I think that we're very much connected, Latin America as a whole. When we think about Mexico, for example, I think that it's very linked, it's very close to the US. I think you have a lot of opportunities, but when you think about Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Peru, you have some regulatory issues and some governmental issues. For example, it's very different from the US and from the US and Europe, and I think that we have some challenges, but I think we have a long way to grow. So I think that it is important to really do more research here in the region. I don't have a lot of data on Latin America. I have more data on Brazil, but I really do believe that the way of we have this series here in Cat Eye that we want to develop to develop something in the Brazilian market to later on expand to Latin America. And at the same time that Latin America is similar in so many ways, I think we are also very different in other ways. For example, in Brazil, we basically don't use cash anymore. We have a really advanced online payment system. So here, even homeless people, they don't use cash anymore. If they're begging for money on the streets, they ask you to transfer for their Pix. It's called PIX. It's an online transfer, and everyone has a cell phone. So at the same time, we're so much more exposed, but I think it's a very local problem when you think about it. But and going back to the problem that you were saying about when you think about everything that's going on, if you don't like if you don't like really big challenges, you kind of give up on working on cyber because it's really scary. And I really do think that systemic risks are a really big problem when you talk about cyber. And quantifying systemic risks is really, really challenging and really hard. But once again, going back to the concept of transferring risks, I think reinsurance companies and insurance companies, they have to be aware of that risk and have to really draw a line on what they're going to insure and what they're not. Because I think we have this product market fit problem, and it may get bigger if the reinsurance companies don't acknowledge this problem. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge on how to deal with this. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question. Please.
No, you did, and you took it to a whole new level, because I was doing this massive speech about the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor, and you actually now mentioned that homeless in Brazil are taking transfers through Pix. That's like a completely new level. It begs the question if we shouldn't have a compulsory insurance on cyber. To be honest with you, just as in many markets in Latin America, as we know, and Alan, you'll tell us about Europe in a second, but the seguro obligatorio accidentes personales, or seguro obligatorio de transporte, or there's a lot of compulsory insurance out there. When you talk about homeless receiving transfers through Pix, as an entity, the regulator might even say, no exclude. I mean, everybody is at risk. Therefore, there should be a compulsory insurance. So you've taken it to a whole new level. It's been phenomenal. Before I go to you, Alan, to everybody that's on our call and on our webinar, we are about 5-ish minutes from moving into Q&A. So if you have questions, please post them on the Q&A section. I will try to pick them all and ask them to our interviewees. But if you can start doing that, that will be great, and then I can start organizing once we move into the Q&A section. So, Alan, over to you.
I forgot a lot to cover, so I was starting to just think that let me just pick the fairly mandatory or compulsory insurance. I don't know if that would be beneficial from the client. We might turn into a commodity. So probably in the phase we're living from a development perspective from the product, that might not be beneficial from the client. I think there's a lot more to do within the cyber insurance space, especially for consumers. That's another part, and what I love about what Paula said about that specific circumstance that you need to take into account, that in Brazil they don't use cash anymore. So that's another element that from a PCI records perspective that would really hit the volumes that we might see in other countries. So I don't know, I mean Spain, but I think it's half of like 50% that we use cash. But yeah, there's a lot to cover, but I'm not very I'm kind of against at least now to have that. But I don't know if for consumer side that might be something that would be critical, because there's the exposure that we have on the protection we have is we're not there yet. So in Brazil, probably they might be facing. In Latin America, there might be, or in Africa, or in India, probably the consumer side of me might be much more exposed than companies from the laws they may face. So this is a whole new world, and love that. A lot to cover, but this is pretty. I would say is my point.
But let me pick on that around consumers, and you just touched on India, because we both know that India is quite advanced, at least in what it's their communication campaign around cyber risks. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you go to India, the government is very visible on the streets about educating the public in terms of cyber risks. And then if you add to that the private companies that are doing so, because it's India, it's turning into also it's a vast country, and we know that it might not be on every corner of the country, but where there's large population centers, they're turning into a cashless centers as well. And so the transfer of electronic money, or the electronic transfer of money, it's pretty much your day to day. And so companies are very involved in sharing the importance of cybersecurity and cyber insurance and cyber protection and all that. So, that is a country where you see great examples of the government being involved, the private sector being involved, caring about the protection of consumers. And I see that happening everywhere. Again, it doesn't need to be a depressed economy or a wealthy economy. It's any economy that has that benefit. So back to you, Alan, on that. And if you could share with us for a second what you've seen in the US market then, because, Paula mentioned earlier, yeah, the US market is far more advanced, as much as might be the case for Europe. But what have you actually seen in the US market that actually gives those examples of maturity then relative to other markets?
Yeah, for sure. What I've been impressed is it's from SME perspective is more how the regulation we were discussing about the product. So how regulation impacts or the liability, the high defense costs, or the legal expenses that might be linked to an incident. we all knew that from underwriting risk from abroad, from out of US. But like but from the product development perspective has been fully different stories. I've been discussing with an underwriting how to develop that, and the circumstances and the loss experience he was sharing uh, push us to just completely change what the product should look like from, I don't know, from premium, even from Canada, which is pretty close. Media liability is it's a whole new story about that. I wasn't aware of all this exposure that we face. But again, what I'm adding as well is not only that the regulation is easy, but also not only in US, but based on the technology you use, so where you are. So that's, for me, it's a key element. See Brazil's example. So for India example, that's a really key element to really understand that regulation, technology you use, and your business model. That's from a company perspective. So in US, of course, you may have a lot of new insurtech companies. Understanding what they do is absolutely key to really link or trying to understand what the exposure they face.
Interesting. So we are getting to the tail end of our webinar. So and Gary has been kind enough to pass some questions directly. And I guess the first question is, where are each of your companies, what are each of your companies doing right now that you consider it's an interesting um, uh, area of focus based on everything that you both have talked about? So if you could share an example of what is something that you think is quite interesting that your companies are doing based on those elements that you've talked about today. And let's just start with you, Paula.
Okay, great. So I know I mentioned the word product market fit like 50 times during this webinar, but I'm sorry, I have to say it again. In Brazil, just a little bit about the market today. We have very few insurance companies here that are actually selling this product, and we're very recent. I was founded 4 months ago, and we're still developing our solution, but we're on our way to sign MOUs with insurance companies to make this product viable here in Brazil. So what we're doing is really trying to understand how much this product costs and what is a cyber insurance policy that people here in Brazil would like to buy. I think that's our strength. So we're developing a solution to both quantify and also provide services for this transfer of risk that I also mentioned 100 times during this webinar. Because we're not only quantifying, we're also providing an active monitoring of risks, and we're also helping policyholders to solve this vulnerabilities once we see them. So we're actually developing a product that, well, I believe it's going to really solve the problem policyholders are trying to solve.
Interesting. Alan, same on your side then.
Sure. What I love about Box Insurance is that I would say that we are really a risk transfer partner for brokers. Not only because, of course, we provide the insurance solution, but we go beyond, and even beyond the ongoing monitoring, all the services that we provide is to help them. But what we do, like additionally, we have solutions for those that when insurance is not an option. For instance, that's the kind of thing we love about it. We are constantly evolving to have as many solutions as possible for brokers, because it's not an easy task. So we provide that kind of solution. We call it Cyberbox Assist, that we provide that specific solutions for those that where sometimes insurance for underwriting guidance are not an option. And we provide we help companies to be insurable. That's another element that we love. That we have our own capabilities to help them to go through that path, to help them to really succeed in transferring that risk. So that's the probably what I love the most, and of course the consumer side, which is something that globally it's going to be very relevant in a very few years.
I agree. I think consumers is going to be something perhaps more on a B2B2C basis than anything, in
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
opinion at least. But I think certainly you're quite right around that. I think in the last few minutes that we have before I run through a quick update to those of us who are still with us around the MIA hub, anything else that you think we have not covered that you guys would like to address right now on the tail end of the conversation?
Well,
Paula?
I'm sorry. I was going to ask if you were asking for the ones who are with us, or if you were asking
I know I
outside.
was asking both of you. So is there any particular topic around today, cyber resilience, that you think we haven't covered that's interesting for us to close the conversation with? We'll
Well, I
start
would
with you,
like.
Paula.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like to just to say one thing that I think it's a very interesting topic for me. When you talk about mandatory insurance for cyber, I think it's a bit cloudy. Sometimes I agree with Alan. Sometimes I think that in a way, yes, in the future, maybe not a near future, but maybe like 10 years from now, I think at some level, cyber insurance might be mandatory here in Brazil. And I really believe in in embedding cyber insurance in some technology channels. For example, clouds. AWS launched a cyber insurance program, not here in Brazil. I would really love them to launch this program here in Brazil. But I think that in a very near future, people will start purchasing cyber insurance policies through these channels, through AWS, Google Cloud, for example, through their service providers. I think that in a way, most tech solutions will come with an embedded cyber insurance or cyber service. We will come with an embedded cyber insurance and with cyber security services. I really think this is going to be a strong distribution channel.
I agree with you. I absolutely love the idea, and what I love about that is that it's a two-way street, because
Yes.
it could be technology companies embedding the insurance, and it could be insurance companies embedding the technology, and everybody wins. So I absolutely love that concept. I 100% with you. Alan, anything that you want to add that you think we have not covered?
Just simply, I would say that in Spanish and in English, but simply just this is probably a message for brokers and agents. This is a great business opportunity for those that haven't been involved in that probably they just been selling for years or other insurance solutions. I think cyber, for the consumer side and for the SME side is a great way to grow your business. So, esto creo que es una oportunidad brutal para todos aquellos que estén como agentes y brokers que no se han dedicado a todo el tema de vender soluciones de cyber. Yo creo que es una grandísima oportunidad de desarrollar el negocio, de cuidar a sus clientes y poder crecer aún más.
Excellent. Excelente. Ótimo. As I think the guys would say in Portuguese, although my Portuguese is not good enough to say anything beyond that. But I think so. Number one, I want to thank you both I want to thank everybody who joined us today, especially to those who stayed until the end. Thank you. You're getting a lot of applauses there. And I think the other great opportunity we want to give you and share with you in the last 5 minutes is we've organized this as the MIA Hub. The MIA Hub, as you can see in your screens, is the first Latin American open insurtech community. We love for you to join us. This is an entity, number one, is non-for-profit. Number two, is run from Miami to drive internationalization and networking across the region. And number three is been thought to bring together both the incumbent communities and the insurtech community. We are here to bring these type of conversations with experts like Paula and Alan. We're going to do more of these every month, or at least one every month. So there's more to come. Thank you both again, Paula and Alan, for your time. It's been phenomenal. And I hope to see you guys soon. And to the rest of the attendees, we also hope to see you in the future webinars to come.
Thank you very much, Hilario. Thank you very much, Alan. It was really, really great being with you today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Be well, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.